Chapter 3. Ujek One-Arm and his army awaited the arrival of Kaladin Brood and his allies, the Feltister Andu, Barghast clans from the far north, a half-score mercenary contingents, and a plains-dwelling Revi. There, on the still raw-killing ground outside the city of Pale, the two forces would meet. Not to wage war, but to carve from bitter history peace. Neither Ujek nor Brood, nor anyone else among their legendary company, could have anticipated the ensuing clash, not of swords, but of worlds. Confessions of Artanthos. Shallow ridges ribboned the hillsides a league north of Pale, barely healed scars of a time when the city's presumptions reached out to devour the steppes bordering the Revi plain. Since memories began, the hills had been sacred to the Revi. Pale's farmers had paid for their temerity with blood. Yet the land was slow to heal. Few of the ancient menhirs, boulder rings, and flat stone crypts remained in place. The stones were now haphazardly piled into meaningless cairns alongside what used to be terraced fields of maize. All that was sacred in these hills was held so only within the minds of the Revi. As in faith, so we are in truth. The Wybe drew the antelope hide closer about her thin, bony shoulders. A new array of pains and aches mapped her frame this morning, evidence that the child had drawn more from her in the night just past. The old woman told herself she felt no resentment, such needs could not be circumvented, and there was little in the child that was natural in any case. Fast, cold-hearted spirits and the blind spells of sorcery had conspired to carve into being something new, unique. And time was growing short, so very short. The Wyber's dark eyes glittered within their nests of wrinkles as she watched the child scampering over the weathered terraces. A mother's instincts ever abided. It was not right to curse them, to lash out at the bindings of love that came in the division of flesh. For all the flaws raging within her, and for all the twisted demands woven into her daughter, the Wybe would not spin webs of hate. Nonetheless, the withering of her body weakened the gifts of the heart to which she so desperately clung. Less than a season past, the Wybe had been a young woman, not yet wedded. She had been proud, unwilling to accept the half braids of grass that numerous young, virile men had set down before the entrance to her tent, not yet ready to entwine her own braid and thus bind herself to marriage. The Revi were a damaged people. How could one think of husband and family in this time of endless, devastating war? She was not as blind as her sister kin. She did not embrace the supposed spirit-blessed duty to produce sons to feed into the ground before the reaper's plow. Her mother had been a reader of bones, gifted with the ability to hold the people's entire repository of memories, every lineage, reaching back to the dying spirit's tear. And her father had held the spear of war, first against the white-faced Barghast, then against the Malazan Empire. She missed them both deeply, yet understood how the deaths, and her own defiance of accepting a man's touch, had together conspired to make her the ideal choice in the eyes of the host of spirits. An untethered vessel, a vessel in which to place two shattered souls, one beyond death and the other held back from death through ancient sorceries, two identities braided together, a vessel that would be used to feed the unnatural child thus created. Among the Revi, who traveled with the herds and raised no walls of stone or brick, such a container, intended for a singular use after which it would be discarded, was called a Wybe, and so she had found herself a new name, and now every truth of her life was held within it. Old without wisdom, weathered without the gift of years, yet I am expected to guide this child, this creature, who gains a season with every one I lose, for whom weaning will mean my death. Look at her now, playing the games a child would play. She smiles, all unknowing of the price her existence, her growth, demands of me. The Wybe heard footsteps behind her, and a moment later a tall, black-skinned woman arrived to stand beside the Revi. The newcomer's angled eyes held on the child playing on the hillside. The prairie wind sent strands of long black hair over her face. Fine, scaled armor glinted from beneath her black-dyed, rawhide shirt. Deceptive, the Tister Andu woman murmured, is she not? The Wybe sighed, then nodded. Hardly a thing to generate fear, the midnight-skinned woman continued, or be the focus of searing arguments. There have been more, then. Kala renews his assault. The Wybe stiffened. She looked up at the Tister Andu. And, has there been a change, Korlat? Brood remained steadfast, Korlat replied after a moment. She shrugged. If he has doubts, he hides them well. He has, the Wybe said. Yet his need for the Revi and our herds outweighs them still. This is calculation, not faith. Will such need remain once an alliance with the one-armed Malazan is fashioned? It is hoped, Korlat ventured, that the Malazans will possess more knowledge of the child's origins. Enough to alleviate the potential threat. You must make Brood understand, Korlat, that what the two souls once were is nothing to what they have become. Her eyes on the playing child, the Wybe continued, she was created within the influence of a Talar Nimbus. Its timeless warren became the binding threads. And were so woven by an Nimbus bonecaster, a bonecaster of flesh and blood, Korlat. This child belongs to the Talar Nimbus. She may well be clothed in the flesh of a Revi, and she may well contain the souls of two Malazan mages, but she is now a soul taken, and more, a bonecaster. And even these truths but brush the edges of what she will become. Tell me, what need have the immortal Talar Nimbus for a flesh and blood bonecaster? Korlat's grimace was wry. I am not the person to ask. Nor are the Malazans. Are you certain of that? Did not the Talar Nimbus march under Malazan banners? Yet they do so no longer, Korlat. What hidden breach exists between them now? What secret motives might lie beneath all that the Malazans advise? We have no way of guessing, have we? I imagine Kaladin Brood is aware of such possibilities, the Tister Andu said dryly. In any case, you may witness and partake in these matters, Wybe. The Malazan contingent approaches, and the warlord seeks your presence at the parley. The Wybe turned about. Kaladin Brood's encampment stretched out before her, precisely organized as usual. Mercenary elements to the west, the Tister Andu holding the center, and her own Revi camps and the Bedouin herds to the east. The march had been a long one, from the old King Plateau, through the cities of Kat and then Patch, and finally onto the south-wending old Revi trail crossing the plain that was the Rivi's traditional home. A home torn apart by years of war, of marching armies and the incendiaries of the Maranth falling from the sky, calls whirling in black speck silence, horror descending on our camps, our sacred herds. Yet now, we are to clasp wrists with our enemy. With the Malazan invaders and the cold-blooded Maranth, we are to weave braids of marriage, our two armies, jaws locked on one another's throats for so long, but a marriage not in the name of peace. No, these warriors now seek another enemy, a new enemy. Beyond Brood's army to the south rose the recently mended walls of Pale, the stains of violence a chilling reminder of Malazan sorceries. A knot of riders had just departed from the city's north gate, an unmarked grey banner announcing their outlawry for all to see as they slowly rode across the bear-killing ground towards Brood's encampment. The Wyber's gaze narrowed suspiciously on that pennant. Old woman, your fears are a curse. Think not of mistrust, think not of the horrors visited upon us by these once invaders. Ujek One-Arm and his host have been outlawed by the hated Empress. One campaign has ended. A new one begins. Spirits below, shall we ever see an end to war? The child joined the two women. The Wybe glanced down at her, saw within the steady, unwavering eyes of the girl a knowledge and wisdom that seemed born of millennia, and perhaps it was indeed so. Here we three stand, for all to see, a child of 10 or 11 years, a woman of youthful visage with unhuman eyes, and a bent old woman, and it is, in every detail, an illusion, for what lies within us is reversed. I am the child. The Tister Andu has known thousands of years of life, and the girl hundreds of thousands. Korlat had also looked down at the child. The Tister Andu smiled. Did you enjoy your play, Silver Fox? For a time, the girl replied in a voice surprisingly low. But I grew sad. Colat's brows rose. And why is that? There was once a sacred trust here between these hills and spirits of the Revi. It is now broken. The spirits were naught but untethered vessels of loss and pain. The hills will not heal. The Wybe felt her blood turn to ice. Increasingly, the child was revealing a sensitivity to rival the wisest shoulder woman among the tribes. Yet there was a certain coolness to that sensitivity, as if a hidden intent lay behind every compassionate word. Can nothing be done, daughter? Silver Fox shrugged. It is no longer necessary. Such as now. What do you mean? The round-faced girl smiled up at the Wybe. If we are to witness the parley, mother, we'd best hurry. The place of meeting was 30 paces beyond the outermost pickets, situated on a low rise. The recent barrows that had been raised to dispose of the dead after the fall of Pale were visible to the west. The Wybe wondered if those countless victims now watched from afar the scene unfolding before her. Spirits are born of spilled blood, after all. And without propitiation, they often twist into inimical forces plagued by nightmare visions and filled with spite. Is it only the Revi who know these truths? From war to alliance, how would such ghosts look upon this? They feel betrayed, Silver Fox said beside her. I will answer them, mother. She reached out to take the Wybe's hand as they walked. This is a time for memories. Ancient memories and recent memories. And you, daughter, the Wybe asked in a low, febrile tone, are you the bridge between the two? You are wise, mother, despite your own lack of faith in yourself. The hidden is slowly revealed. Look on these once enemies. You fight in your mind, raising up all the differences between us. You struggle to hold on to your dislike, your hatred of them, for that is what is familiar. Memories are the foundations of such hatred. But mother, memories hold another truth, a secret one, and that is all that we have experienced, yes. The Wybe nodded. So our elders tell us, daughter, she said, biting back a faint irritation. Experiences. They are what we share. From opposite sides, perhaps, but they are the same. The same. I know this, Silver Fox. Blame is meaningless. We are all pulled, as tides are pulled by an unseen, implacable will. The girl's hand tightened in the Wybe's hand. Then asked Colat, mother, what her memories tell her. Glancing over at the Tister Andu, the Revi woman raised her brows and said, you have been listening, yet saying nothing. What reply does my daughter expect from you? Colat's smile was wistful. Experiences are the same. Between your two armies, indeed. But also, across the breadth of time. Among all who possess memories, whether an individual or a people, life's lessons are ever the same lessons. The Tister Andu's now violet eyes rested on Silver Fox. Even among the Talar Nimis, is this what you are telling us, child? She shrugged. In all that is to come, think on forgiveness. Hold to it, but know too that it must not always be freely given. Silver Fox swung her sleepy gaze to Colat and the dark eyes suddenly hardened. Sometimes forgiveness must be denied. Silence followed. Dear spirits, guide us. This child frightens me. Indeed, I can understand Kala, and that is more worrying than anything else. They came to a halt far to one side of the place of parley, just beyond the pickets of Brood's encampment. Moments later, the Malazans reached the rise. There were 4 of them. The Wybe had no difficulty in recognizing Dujek, the now renegade High Fist. The one-armed man was older than she had expected, however, and he sat in the saddle of his roan gelding as would a man pained with old aches and stiff bones. He was thin, of average height, wearing plain armor and an undecorated standard-issue short-sword strapped to his belt. His narrow, hatchet face was beardless, displaying a lifetime of battle scars. He wore no helmet, the only indication of rank being his long grey cape and its silver-wrought fastening. At Dujek's left side rode another officer, grey-bearded and solidly built. A visored helm with a chain camel disguised much of his features, but the Wybe sensed in him an immeasurable strength of will. He sat straight in his saddle, though she noted that his left leg was held awkwardly, the boot not in the stirrup. The chain of his calf-length hauberk was batted and ribboned with leather stitches. That he sat on Dujek's unprotected left side was not lost on the Wybe. To the renegade High Fist's right sat a young man, evidently an aide of some sort. He was nondescript, yet she saw that his eyes roved ceaselessly, taking in details of all that he saw. It was this man who held the outlawry pennon in one leather-gloved hand. The 4th rider was a black Maranth, entirely encased in chitinous armor, and that armor was badly damaged. The warrior had lost all 4 fingers of his right hand, yet he continued to wear what was left of its gauntlet. Countless sword slashes marred the gleaming black armor. Colat grunted softly beside her. That's a hard-bitten lot, wouldn't you say? The Wybe nodded. Who is that on Dujek Onion's left? Whiskey Jack, I would imagine, the Tister Andu replied with a wry smile. Cuts quite a figure, isn't he? For a moment the Wybe felt like the young woman that she was in truth. She wrinkled her nose. Revi aren't that hairy, thank the spirits. Even so. Even so. Silver Fox spoke. I would like him for an uncle. The 2 women looked down at her in surprise. An uncle? The Wybe asked. The girl nodded. You can trust him. While the one-armed old man is hiding something, well, no, they both are and it's the same secret, yet I trust the bearded one anyway. The Maranth, he laughs inside. Always laughs, and no one knows this. Not a cruel laugh, but one filled with sorrow. And the one with the banner, Silver Fox frowned. I am uncertain of him. I think I always have been. The Wybe met Colat's eyes over the girl's head. I suggest, the Tister Andu said. We moved closer. As they approached the rise, 2 figures emerged from the picket line, followed by an outrider bearing a penniless standard, all on foot. Seeing him, the Wybe wondered what the Malazans would make of the 2 warriors in the lead. There was Barghast blood in Kaladin Brood, reflected in his tall, hulking form and his wide, flat face, and something else besides, something not quite human. The man was huge, well matched to the iron hammer strapped to his back. He and Dujek had been dueling on this continent for over 12 years, a clash of wills that had seen more than a score pitched battles and as many sieges. Both soldiers had faced dire odds more than once, yet had come through, bloodied but alive. They had long since taken the measure of the other on fields of battle, but now, finally, they were about to come face to face. At Brood's side strode Kala, tall, gaunt and grey. His full-length surcoat of chain glittered in the morning's diffuse light. A plain bastard sword hung from the iron rings of his harness, swinging in time with his heavy steps. If any player in this deadly game had remained a mystery to the Wybe, it was the self-named High King. Indeed, all the Revi woman could be certain of was Kala's hatred for Silver Fox, a hatred bred of fear, and perhaps a knowledge that the man alone possessed, a knowledge he was unwilling to share with anyone. Kala claimed to have lived through millennia, claimed to have once ruled an empire that he himself had finally destroyed for reasons he would not reveal. Yet he was not an ascendant, his longevity probably came from alchemies, and was anything but perfect, for his face and body were as ravaged as those of a mortal man who was nearing a century of life. Brood made use of Kala's knowledge of tactics, what seemed an instinctive mastery of the sweep and shift of vast campaigns, but for the High King it was clear to all that such contests were but passing games, attended to with distraction and barely veiled disinterest. Kala commanded no loyalty among the soldiers. Grudging respect was all the man achieved, and the Wybe suspected, all he ever had achieved, or ever would. His expression now, as he and Brood reached the rise, revealed disdain and contempt as he regarded Dujek, Whiskey Jack, and the Marantz commander. It would be a struggle not to take offense, yet all three Malazans seemed to be ignoring the High King as they dismounted, their attention fixed unwaveringly on Kaladin Brood. Dujek One Arm stepped forward. Greetings, Warlord. Permit me to introduce my modest contingent. Second in command Whiskey Jack. Artanthos, my present standard bearer. And the leader of the Black Maranth, whose title translates into something like Achivon, and whose name is entirely unpronounceable. The renegade High Fist grinned over at the armored figure. Since he shook hands with a Reeve spirit up in Black Dog Forest, we've taken to calling him Twist. Artanthos, Silverfox quietly murmured. He's not used that name in a long time. Nor is he as he appears. If an illusion Corlat whispered, then it is masterful. I sense nothing untowards. The child nodded. The prairie airs rejuvenated him. Who is he, daughter? The YB asked. A chimera, in truth. Following Dujek's words, Brood grunted and said, at my side is Kala, my second in command. On behalf of the Tister Andu is Corlat. Of the Reeve, the YB and her young charge. Bearing what's left of my standard is Outrider Herlockle. Dujek was frowning. Where is the Crimson Guard? Prince Chaos Devor and his forces are attending to internal matters, for the moment, High Fist. They will not be joining our efforts against the Panyan Domine. Too bad, Dujek muttered. Brood shrugged. Auxiliary units have been assembled to replace them. A Salto and Horse Regiment, 4 clans of the Barghast, a mercenary company from One Eye Cat, and another from Mott. Whiskey Jack seemed to choke. He coughed, then shook his head. That wouldn't be the Mott Irregulars, Warlord, would it? Brood's smile revealed filed teeth. You've some experience with them, haven't you, Commander? When you soldiered among the bridge burners. They were a handful, Whiskey Jack agreed, though not just in a fight, they spent most of their time stealing our supplies then running away, as I recall. A talent for logistics, we called it, Kala commented. I trust, Brood said to Dujek, that the arrangements with Darajhistan's council have proved satisfactory. They have, Warlord. Their donations have allowed us to fulfill our resupply needs. I believe a delegation is on its way from Darajhistan and should be here in a short while, Brood added. Should you require additional assistance? Generous of them, the High Fist said, nodding. The command tent awaits us, the Warlord said. There are details that need to be discussed. As you say, Dujek agreed. Warlord, we have battled one another for a long time. I look forward to fighting side by side for a change. Let us hope the Panyan Domine proves a worthy foe. Brood grimaced. But not too worthy. Granted, Dujek said, grinning. Still standing slightly apart with the Tister Andu and the YB, Silverfox smiled and spoke quietly. So we have it. They have locked gazes. Taken the measure of the other, and both are pleased. A remarkable alliance, this Corlat muttered with a faint shake of her head. To so easily relinquish so much. Pragmatic soldiers, the YB said, are the most frightening among the people whom I have known in my short life. Silverfox laughed low in her throat. And you doubt your own wisdom, mother? Kaladin Brood's command tent was situated in the center of the Tister Andu encampment. Though she had visited it many times and had acquired some familiarity with the Tister Andu, the YB was once again struck by the sense of strangeness as she strode with the others into their midst. Antiquity and pathos were twin breaths filling the aisles and pathways between the high-peaked narrow tents. There was little in the way of conversation among the few tall, dark-clothed figures they passed, nor was any particular attention accorded Brood and his entourage. Even Corlat, Anomander Rake's second in command, received but scant notice. It was difficult for the YB to understand a people plagued by indifference and apathy that made even the efforts of civil discourse too much to contemplate. There were secret tragedies in the long, tortured past of the Tister Andu. Wounds that would never heal. Even suffering, the Reeve had come to realize, was capable of becoming a way of life. To then extend such an existence from decades into centuries, then into millennia, still brought home to the YB a dull shock of horror. These narrow, arcane tents might be home to ghosts, a restless, roving necropolis haunted with lost spirits. The strangely stained, ragged ribbons tied to the iron tent poles added a votive touch to the scene, as did the gaunt, spectral figures of the Tister Andu themselves. They seemed to be waiting, an eternal expectation that never failed to send shivers through the YB. And worst, she knew their capabilities, she had seen them draw blades in anger, then wield them with appalling efficiency. And she had seen their sorcery. Among humans, cold indifference was often manifested in acts of brutal cruelty, was often the true visage of evil, if such a thing existed, but the Tister Andu had yet to reveal such wanton acts. They fought at Brood's command, for a cause not their own, and those few of them who were killed on such occasions were simply left on the ground. It had fallen to the Reeve to retrieve those bodies, to treat them in the Reeve way and to mourn their passing. The Tister Andu looked upon such efforts without expression, as if bemused by the attention accorded to a mere corpse. The command tent waited directly ahead, octagonal and wood-framed, the canvas a much-mended sun-faded orange that had once been red. It had once belonged to the Crimson Guard, and had been left on a rubbish heap before Outrider Herlockle had come to rescue it for the Warlord. As with the standard, Brood wasn't much for proud accoutrements. The large flap at the entrance had been tied back. Atop the front support pole sat a great raven, head cocked towards the group, beak open as if in silent laughter. The Wyber's thin lips quirked into a half-smile upon seeing Crone. Anomander Rake's favored servant had taken to hounding Kaladin Brood, offering incessant advice like a conscience twisted awry. The great raven had tested the Warlord's patience more than once, yet Brood tolerates her in the same way he tolerates Anomander Rake himself. Uneasy allies, the tales all agree that Brood and Rake have worked side by side for a long, long time, yet is there trust between them? That particular relationship is a hard one to understand, with layers upon layers of complexity and ambiguity, all the more confusing for Crone's dubious role in providing the bridge between the two warriors. Dujek One Arm. Crone screamed, the outburst followed by a mad cackle. Whiskey Jack. I bring you greetings from Wonbaruk, an alchemist in Darajhistan. And from my master, Anomander Rake, Lord of Moon's Spawn, Knight of High House Darkness, son of Mother Dark herself, I convey to you his not greeting as such, not greeting, but amusement. Yes, amusement. Dujek frowned. And what so amuses your master, Bird? Bird. The great raven shrieked. I am Crone, the unchallenged matriarch of Moon's Spawn's cacophonous vast murder of kin. Whiskey Jack grunted. Matriarch to the great ravens. You speak for them all, do you? I'd accept that Hood knows you're loud enough. Upstart. Dujek One Arm, my master's amusement is beyond explanation. Meaning you don't know, the renegade High Fist interjected. Outrageous audacity, show respect, mortal, else I choose your carcass to feed on when the day comes. You'd likely break your beak on my hide, Crone, but you're welcome to it when that moment arrives. Brood growled, do you still have that beak strap, Herlockle? I do, sir. The great raven hissed, ducking her head and half raising her vast wings. Don't you dare, Ox. Repeat that affront at your peril. Then hold your tongue. Brood faced the others and waved them to the entrance. Crone perched over everyone, bobbed her head as each soldier strode beneath her. When it was the Wyver's turn, the great raven chuckled. The child in your hand is about to surprise us all, old woman. The Reeve paused. What do you sense, old crow? Crone laughed in silence before replying, Eminence, dearest clay pot, and naught else. Greetings, child Silverfox. The girl studied the great raven for a moment, then said, "Hello, crone. I had not before realized that your kind were born in the rotting flesh of a..." Silence. Crone shrieked. Such knowledge should never be spoken. You must learn to remain silent, child, for your own safety. For yours, you mean, Silver Fox said, smiling. In this instance, I'll not deny it. Yet listen to this wise old creature before stepping into this tent, child. There are those waiting within who will view the extent of your awareness should you be foolish enough to reveal it as the deadliest threat. Revelations could mean your death. And know this, you are not yet able to protect yourself. Nor can the YB, whom I cherish and love, hope to defend you, hers is not a violent power. You will both need protectors, do you understand? Single quote. Her smile unperturbed, Silver Fox nodded. The YB's hand tightened instinctively around her daughter's even as a tumult of emotions assailed her. She was not blind to the threats to Silver Fox and herself, nor was she unaware of the powers burgeoning within the child. But I sense no power within me, violent or otherwise. Though spoken with affection, Crone named me Claypot in truth, and all that it once protected is no longer within me, but standing here, exposed and vulnerable, at my side. She glanced up at the great raven one last time as Silver Fox led her inside. She met Crone's black, glittering eyes. Love and cherish me, do you, Crow? Bless you for that. The command tent's central chamber was dominated by a large map table of rough-hewn wood, warped and misshapen as if cobbled together by a drunken carpenter. As the YB and Silver Fox entered, the veteran Whiskey Jack, helmet unstrapped and under one arm, was laughing, his eyes fixed upon the table. You bastard warlord, he said, shaking his head. Brood was frowning at the object of Whiskey Jack's attention. I'll grant you it's not pretty. That's because Fiddler and Hedge made the damn thing, the Malazan said. In Motwood. Who were Fiddler and Hedge? My two sappers when I was commanding the 9th Squad. They'd organized one of the notorious card games, using the deck of dragons, and needed a surface on which to play it. 100 fellow bridgeburners had gathered for the game, despite the fact that we were under constant attack, not to mention bogged down in the middle of a swamp. The game was interrupted by a pitched battle, we were overrun, then driven back, then we retook the position, all of which consumed maybe a bell, and lo, someone had walked off with a 200-pound table in the meantime. You should have heard the sappers cursing. Kaladin Brood crossed his arms, still frowning at the table. After a few moments he grunted. A donation from the Mott Irregulars. It has served me well, my compliments to your sappers. I can have it returned. No need, warlord. It seemed the Malazan was about to say something more, something important, but then he simply shook his head. A soft gasp from Silver Fox startled the YB. She looked down, brows raised questioningly, but the girl's attention was swinging from the table to Whiskey Jack, then back again, a small smile on her lips. Uncle Whiskey Jack, she said suddenly. All eyes turned to Silver Fox, who blithely continued, those sappers and the games, they cheat, don't they? The bearded Malazan scowled. Not an accusation I'd recommend you repeat, especially if there's any bridgeburners around, lass. A lot of coins gone one way and one way only in those games. Did Fid and Hedge cheat? They made their rules so complicated no one could tell one way or the other. So to answer you, I don't know. His scowl was deepening as he studied Silver Fox, as if the man was growing troubled by something. Something, like a sense of familiarity. Realization dawned within the YB. Of course, he knows nothing about her, about what she is, what she was. It's their first meeting, as far as he's concerned, yet she called him uncle, and more, there's that voice, throaty, knowing. He knows not the child, but the woman she once was. Everyone waited for Silver Fox to say more, to offer explanation. Instead she simply walked up to the table and slowly ran her hand across its battered surface. A fleeting smile crossed her features. Then she pulled close one of the mismatched chairs and sat down. Brood sighed, gestured to Herlockle. Find us that map of the Panyan Domine territories. With the large map laid out, the others slowly gathered round the table. After a moment, Dujek grunted. None of our own maps are this detailed, he said. You've noted the locations of various Panyan armies. How recent is this? 3 days, Brood said. Crone's cousins are there tracking movements. The notes referring to the Panyan's means of organization and past tactics have been culled from various sources. As you can see, they're poised to take the city of Capistan. Morik, Setter and Lest have all fallen within the past 4 months. The Panyan's forces are still on the south side of the Catlin River, but preparations for the crossing have begun. The Capistan army won't contest the crossing. Dujek asked. If not, then they're virtually inviting a siege. I take it no one expects Capistan to put up much of a fight. The situation in Capistan is a bit confused, the warlord explained. The city's ruled by a prince and a coalition of high priests, and the two factions are ever at odds with each other. Problems have been compounded by the prince's hiring a mercenary company to augment his own minimal forces. What company? Whiskey Jack asked. The Grey Swords. Have you heard of them, Commander? No. Nor have I, Brood said. It's said they're up from Ellingarth, a decent compliment, over 7,000. Whether they'll prove worthy of the usurious fees they've carved from the prince remains to be seen. Hood knows their so-called standard contract is almost twice the coin of what the Crimson Guard demands. Their commander read the situation, Kala commented, his tone suggesting vast weariness, if not outright boredom. Prince Jelarkin has more coin than soldiers, and the Panyans won't be bought off. It's a holy war as far as the seer's concerned, after all. To worsen matters, the Council of High Priests has the backing of each temple's private company of highly trained, well-equipped soldiers. That's almost 3,000 of the city's most able fighters, whilst the prince himself has been left with dregs for his own Capanthal, which he's prevented from expanding beyond 2,000 by law. For years the Masked Council, the coalition of temples, has been using the Capanthal as a recruiting ground for their own companies, bribing away the best. Clearly the YB wasn't alone in suspecting that given the opportunity, Kala would have gone on all afternoon, for Whiskey Jack interrupted the man as he drew breath. So this Prince Jelarkin circumvented the law by hiring mercenaries. Correct, was Brood's swift reply. In any case, the Masked Council has managed to invoke yet another law preventing the Grey Swords from active engagement beyond the city walls, so the crossing will not be contested. Idiots, Dujek growled. Given this is a holy war, you'd think the temples would do all they could to effect a united front against the Panyans. I imagine they believe they are, Kala answered with a sneer that could have been meant for Dujek or the priests in Capistan, or both. While at the same time ensuring that the prince's power remains held in check. It's more complicated than that, Brood counted. The ruler of Morik capitulated with little bloodshed by arresting all the priests in her city and handing them over to the Panyans' Tenascari. In one move, she saved her city and its citizens, topped up her royal coffers with booty from the temples and got rid of an eternal thorn in her side. The Panyan seer granted her a governorship which is better than being torn apart and devoured by the Tenascari, which is what happened to the priests. The YB hissed. Torn apart and devoured. The warlord said. The Tenascari are the seer's peasant army, they're fanatics that the seer doesn't bother supplying. Indeed, he's given them his holy blessing to do whatever is necessary to feed and arm themselves. If certain other rumors are true, then cannibalism is the least of the horrors. We've heard similar rumors, Dujek muttered. So, warlord, the question before us is, do we seek to save Capistan or let it fall? The seer must know we're coming. His followers have spread the cult far beyond his borders, in Darraghiston, in Pale, in Saltown, meaning he knows we will be crossing Catlan River somewhere, somewhen. If he takes Capestan, then the river's widest ford is in his hands. Which leaves us with naught but the old ford west of Saltown where the stone bridge used to be. Granted, our engineers could float us a bridge there, provided we bring the wood with us. That's the overland option, in any case. We've two others, of course. Crone, perched on one end of the table, cackled. Listen to him. The Wybie nodded, understanding the great raven and experiencing her own amused disbelief. Ujek scowled down the length of the table at Crone. You have a problem, bird. You are the warlord's match indeed. Word for word, you think aloud as he does. Oh, how can one not see the honed edge of poetry in your mutual war of the past 12 years? Be quiet, Crone, Brood commanded. Capestan will be besieged. The Panion's forces are formidable. We've learned that Septarchal Path is commanding the expedition, and he's the ablest of all the Seer's Septarchs. He has half the total number of Beklites with him, that's 50,000 regular infantry, and a division of Erdemen besides the usual support attachments and auxiliary units. Capestan is a small city, but the prince has worked hard on the walls, and the city's layout itself is peculiarly suited to district-by-district defense. If the Grey Swords don't pull out with the first skirmish, Capestan might hold for a time. Nonetheless, my Black Morants could land a few companies in the city, Dujek said, glancing over at the silent twist, but without an explicit invitation to do so, tension could prove problematic. Kala snorted. Now that is an understatement. What city on Genevakis would welcome Malazan legions into their midst? More, you'd have to bring your own food, you can be sure of that. High fist, not to mention face outright hostility if not actual betrayal from the Cappan people. It's clear, Whiskey Jack ventured, that we need to establish preliminary contact with Capestan's prince. Silver Fox giggled, startling everyone. All this orchestration, uncle. You've already set in motion a plan to do so. You and the one-armed soldier have schemed this to the last detail. You plan on liberating Capestan, though of course not directly, you two never do anything directly, do you? You want to remain hidden behind the events, a classic Malazan tactic if ever there was one. Like the master gamblers they were, the two men showed no expression at her words. Kala's chuckle was a soft rattle of bones. The Wybie studied Whiskey Jack. The child's so very alarming, isn't she? By the spirits, she alarms even me, and I know so much more than you do, sir. Well, Brood rumbled after a moment, I'm delighted to hear we're in agreement. Capestan mustn't fall if we can help it, and an indirect means of relief is probably the best option, all things considered. On the surface, we must be seen, the majority of your forces as well as mine, one arm, to be marching overland at a predictable pace. That will establish Septarchal Path's timetable for the siege, for both him and us. I take it we're also agreed that Capestan must not be our sole focus. Ujek slowly nodded. It may still fall, despite our efforts. If we're to defeat the Panion Domine, we must strike for its heart. Agreed. Tell me, one arm, which city have you targeted for this first season of the campaign? Coral, Whiskey Jack replied immediately. All eyes returned to the map. Brood was grinning. It seems we do indeed think alike. Once we reach the north border of the Domine, we drive like a spear southward, a swift succession of liberated cities. Seta, lest Morik won't the governors be pleased, then to Coral itself. We undo in a single season the Seer's gains over the past 4 years. I want the cult reeling, I want cracks sent right through the damn thing. Aye, warlord. So we march overland, yes. No boats, that would hasten Kulpath's hand, after all. There's one more issue to clarify, however, Whiskey Jack continued, his grey eyes swinging to the one representative, apart from the Black Morant's commander, who'd yet to speak, and that is, what can we expect from a Nomander rake? Corlat. Will the Tister Andu be with us? The woman simply smiled. Brood cleared his throat. Like you, he said, we have initiated some moves of our own. As we speak, Moon's spawn travels towards the Domine. Before it reaches the Seer's territory, it will disappear. Dujek raised his brows. An impressive feat. Crone cackled. We know little of the sorcery behind the Seer's power, the warlord said, only that it exists. Like your Black Morants, Moon's spawn represents tactical opportunities we'd be fools not to exploit. Brood's grin broadened. Like you, High Fist, we seek to avoid predictability. He nodded towards Corlat. The Tister Andu possess formidable sorceries. Not enough, Silverfox cut in. The Tister Andu woman frowned down at the girl. That is quite an assertion, child. Kala hissed. Trust nothing of what she says. Indeed, as Brood well knows, I consider her presence at this meeting foolish. She is no ally of ours. She will betray us all, mark my words. Betrayal, it is her oldest friend. Hear me, all of you. This creature is an abomination. Oh Kala, Silverfox sighed, must you always go on like that? Dujek turned to Kaladin Brood. Warlord, I admit to some confusion over the girl's presence. Who in Hood's name is she? She seems in possession of preternatural knowledge. For what seems a 10-year-old child. She is far more than that, Kala snapped, staring at Silverfox with hard, hate-filled eyes. Look at the hag beside her, the High King growled. She's barely seen 20 summers, High Fist, and this child was torn from her womb not 6 months ago. The abomination feeds on the life force of her mother. No, not mother, the unfortunate vessel that once hosted the child. You all shivered at the cannibalism of the Tenniscari. What think you of a creature that so devours the life soul of the one who birthed it? And there is more. He stopped, visibly bit back what he was about to say, and sat back. She should be killed. Now. Before her power surpasses us all. There was silence within the tent. Damn you, Kala. Is this what you want to show our newfound allies? A camp divided. And spirits below. Damn you a second time, for she never knew. She never knew. Trembling, the Wybie looked down at Silverfox. The girl's eyes were wide, even now filling with tears as she stared up at her mother. Do I? She whispered. Do I feed on you? The Wybie closed her eyes, wishing she could hide the truth from Silverfox once again, and forevermore. Instead, she said, not your choice, daughter, it is simply part of what you are, and I accept this, and yet rage at the foul cruelty of it, as must you. There is an urgency within you, Silverfox, a force ancient and undeniable, you know it as well, feel it. Ancient and undeniable. Kala rasped. You don't know the half of it, woman. He jolted forward across the table and grasped Silverfox's tunic, pulled her close. Their faces inches apart, the High King bared his teeth. You're in there, aren't you? I know it. I feel it. Come out, bitch. Release her, Brood commanded in a low, soft voice. The High King's sneer broadened. He relented his grip on the girl's tunic, slowly leaned back. Heart-pounding, the Wybie raised a trembling hand to her face. Terror had ripped through her when Kala had grasped her daughter, an icy flood that left her limbs without strength, vanquishing with ease her maternal instinct to defend, revealing to herself, and to everyone present, her own cowardice. She felt tears of shame well in her eyes, trickle down her lined cheeks. Touch her again, the warlord continued, and I will beat you senseless, Kala. As you like, the ancient warrior replied. Armor rustled as Whiskey Jack turned to Kaladin Brood. The commander's face was dark, his expression harsh. Had you not done so, warlord, I would have voiced my own threat. He fixed iron eyes on the High King. Harm a child. I would not beat you senseless, Kala, I would rip your heart out. The High King grinned. Indeed. I shake with fear. That will do, Whiskey Jack murmured. His gauntleted left hand lashed out in a backhanded slap, striking Callah's face. Blood sprayed across the table as the High King's head snapped back. The force of the blow staggered him. The handle of his bastard sword was suddenly in his hands, the sword hissing, then halting, half-drawn. Callah could not move his arms further, for Kaladin Brood now gripped both wrists. The High King strained, blood vessels swelling on his neck and temple, achieving nothing. Brood must have tightened his huge hands then, for he gasped, the sword's handle dropping from his grasp, the weapon thunking back into the scabbard. Brood stepped closer, but the Wybie heard his soft words nonetheless. Accept what you have earned, Callah. I have had quite enough of your contempt at this gathering. Any further test of my temper and it shall be my hammer striking your face. Understood. After a long moment, the High King grunted. Brood released him. Silence filled the tent, no one moving, all eyes on Callah's bleeding face. Dujek withdrew a cloth from his belt crusted with dried shaving soap and tossed it at the High King. Keep it, he growled. The Wybie moved up behind a pale, wide-eyed silver fox and laid her hands on her daughter's shoulders. No more, she whispered. Please. Whiskey Jack faced Brood once again, ignoring Callah as if the man had ceased to exist. Explain please, warlord, he said in a calm voice. What in Hood's name is this child? Shrugging her mother's hands from her shoulders, Silver Fox stood poised as if about to flee. Then she shook her head, wiped her eyes and drew a shuddering breath. No, she said, let none answer but me. She looked up at her mother, the briefest meeting of gazes, then surveyed the others once more. In all things, she whispered, let none answer but me. The Wybie reached out a hand, but could not touch. You must accept it, daughter, she said, hearing the brittleness of her own conviction, and knowing, with a renewed surge of shame, that the others heard it as well. You must forgive yourself. Oh, spirits below, I dare not speak such words, I have lost the right, I have surely lost it now. Silver Fox turned to Whiskey Jack. The truth, now, uncle. I am born of two souls, one of whom you knew very well. The woman Tattersail. The other soul belonged to the discorporate, ravaged remnants of a high mage named Nightchill, in truth, little more than her charred flesh and bones, though other fragments of her were preserved as a consequence of a sealing spell. Tattersail's death occurred within the sphere of the Talon Warren, as projected by Talanimus. The Wybie alone saw the standard-bearer Artanthos flinch. And what, sir, do you know of this? The question flitted briefly through her mind, conjecture and consideration were tasks too demanding to exercise. Within that influence, Uncle, Silver Fox continued, something happened. Something unexpected. A bonecaster from the distant past appeared, as did an elder god and a mortal soul. Cloth held to his face, Callah's snort was muffled. Nightchill, he murmured. Such a lack of imagination. Did Caerul even know? Ah, what irony. Silver Fox resumed. It was these three who gathered to help my mother, this Reavie woman who found herself with an impossible child. I was born in two places at once, among the Reavie in this world, and into the hands of the bonecaster in the Talon Warren. She hesitated, shuddering as if suddenly spent. My future, she whispered after a moment, her arms drawing around herself, belongs to the Talanimus. She spun suddenly to call at. They are gathering, and you will need their power in the war to come. Unholy conjoining, Callah rasped, hand and cloth falling away, eyes narrowed, his face white as parchment behind the smeared blood. As I had feared, oh, you fools. Every one of you. Fools. Gathering, the Tister Andu repeated, also ignoring the High King. Why? To what end, Silver Fox? That is for me to decide, for I exist to command them. To command them all. My birth proclaimed the gathering, a demand that every Talanimus on this world has heard. And now, those who are able are coming. They are coming. In his mind, Whiskey Jack was reeling. Fishes in Brood's contingent was alarming enough, but the child's revelations, his thoughts spun, spiraled down, then arose in a new place. The command tent and its confines slipped away, and he found himself in a world of twisted schemes, dark betrayals and their fierce, unexpected consequences, a world he hated with a passion. Memories rose like specters. The enfilade at Pale, the decimation of the bridgeburners, the assault on Moon's Spawn. A plague of suspicions, a maelstrom of desperate schemes. Arcaranes, Belladin, Nightchill, Tattersail. The list of mages whose deaths could be laid at High Mage Tasgren's sandaled feet was written in the blood of senseless paranoia. Whiskey Jack had not been sorry to see the High Mage take his leave, though the commander suspected he was not as far off as it seemed. Outlawry, Lassine's proclamation cut us loose, but it's all a lie. Only he and Dujek knew the truth of that. The remainder of the host believed they had indeed been outlawed by the Empress. Their loyalty was to Dujek One Arm, and perhaps to me as well. And Hood knows we'll test that loyalty before we're done. Yet she knows. The girl knows. He had no doubt that she was Tattersail reborn. The sorceress was there, in the cast of the child's features, in the way she stood and moved, in that sleepy, knowing gaze. The repercussions that tumbled from that truth overwhelmed Whiskey Jack. He needed time to think. Tattersail reborn, damn you to Hood Tasgren, inadvertent or not, what have you done? Whiskey Jack had not known Nightchill, they'd never spoken, and the breadth of his knowledge was based solely on the tales he'd heard. Made to the Thelamen, Belladin, and a practitioner of high ration sorcery, she had been among the Emperor's chosen. Ultimately betrayed, just as the bridgeburners had been. There had been an edge to her, it was said, a hint of jagged blood-stained iron. And he could see what remained of that woman had cast a shadow over the child. The soft gleam in Tattersail's sleepy eyes had darkened somehow, and seeing it frayed the commander's already rattled nerves. Oh, Hood. One of those repercussions had just settled in his mind with a thunderous clang. Oh, the gods forgive us our foolish games. Back in Pale waited Ganos Perrin, Tattersail's lover. What will he make of Silver Fox? From woman to a newborn babe in an instant, then from that newborn to a 10-year-old child in 6 months. And 6 months from now, a 20-year-old woman. Perrin, lad, is it grief that is burning holes in your gut? If so, then what will its answering do to you? As he struggled to comprehend the young girl's words and all that he saw in her face, his thoughts turned to the Wybie standing beside Silver Fox. Sorrow flooded him. The gods were cruel indeed. The old woman would likely be dead within the year, a brutal sacrifice to the child's needs. A malign, nightmarish twist to the role of motherhood. The girl's final words jarred the commander yet again. They are coming, the Talanimus, Hood's breath, as if matters weren't complicated enough. Where do I place my faith in all this? Callah, a cold, uncanny bastard himself, calls her an abomination. He would kill her if he could. That much is plain. I'll not abide harming a child, but is she a child? Yet, Hood's breath. She's Tattersail reborn, a woman of courage and integrity. And Nightchill, a high mage who served the Emperor. And now, strangest, most alarming fact of all, she is the new ruler of the Talanimus. Whiskey Jack blinked, the tent and its occupants coming into focus once again. Silence writhing with tumultuous thoughts. His gaze swung back to Silver Fox, saw the paleness of her young, round face, noted with a pang of empathy the tremble in the child's hands, then away again. The Tister Andu Korlat was watching him. Their eyes locked. Such extraordinary beauty, while Dujek is dog-face ugly. Further proof I chose the wrong side all those years back. She's hardly interested in me that way. No, she's trying to say something else entirely. After a long moment, he nodded. Silver Fox, she's still a child, a clay tablet scarcely etched. Tister Andu, I understand you. Those who chose to stand close to Silverfox might well be able to influence what she was to become. Corlat sought a private conversation with him, and he just accepted the invitation. Whiskey Jack wished he had Quick Ben at his side right now. The Seven Cities mage was sharp when it came to situations like these. The commander already felt out of his depth. Paran, you poor bastard. What do I tell you? Should I arrange a meeting between you and Silverfox? Will I be able to prevent one once you're told? Is it even any of my business? Crone's beak gaped, but not in soundless laughter this time. Instead, unfamiliar terror raced through her. Talan Imis. And Caryl, the elder god. Holders of the truth of the great ravens, a truth no one else knows except for Silverfox by the abyss. Silverfox, who looked upon my soul and read all within it. Careless, careless child. Would you force us to defend ourselves from you? From those whom you claim to command? We great ravens have never fought our own wars. Would you see us unleashed by your unmindful revelations? Should Rake learn, protestations of innocence will avail us naught. We were there at the chaining, were we not? Yet we were there at fall itself. The great ravens were born like maggots in the flesh of the fallen one, and that will damn us. But wait, have we not been honorable guardians of the crippled god's magic? And were we not the ones who delivered to one and all the news of the Panion Domine, the threat it represents? A magic we can unleash, if forced to. Child, you threaten so much with your careless words. Her black, glittering eyes sought out and fixed on Kaladin Brood. Whatever thoughts the warlord possessed remained hidden behind the flat, bestial mask that was his face. Rein in your panic, old hag. Return to the concerns before us. Think. The Malazan Empire had made use of the Talan Imis in the Emperor's time. The conquest of 7 cities had been the result. Then, with Kellenwood's death, the alliance had dissolved, and so Genevakis was spared the devastating implacability of tens of thousands of undead warriors who could travel as dust in the wind. This alone had allowed Kaladin Brood to meet the Malazan threat on an equal footing, perhaps it only seemed that way. Has he ever truly unleashed the Tister Andu? Has he ever let loose Anomander Rake? Has he ever shown his own true power? Brood's an ascendant, one forgets that, in careless times. His warren is tenors, the power of the land itself, the earth that is home to the eternal sleeping goddess Byrne. Kaladin Brood has the power, there in his arms and in that formidable hammer on his back, to shatter mountains. An exaggeration. A low flight over the broken peaks east of the Laderon Plateau is proof enough of his younger, more precipitous days. Grandmother Crone, you should know better. Power draws power. It has always been thus, and now have come the Talan Imis, and once again the balance shifts. My children spy upon the Panion Domine, they can smell the power rising from those lands so thoroughly sanctified in blood, yet it remains faceless, as if hidden beneath layer after deceiving layer. What hides at the core of that empire of fanatics? The horrific child knows I'd swear on the god's bed of broken flesh to that, oh yes. And she will lead the Talan Imis to that very heart. Do you grasp this, Kaladin Brood? I think you do. And even as that hoary old tyrant Kala utters his warnings with a bloodless will, even as you are rocked by the imminent arrival of undead allies, so you are jolted even more by the fact that they will be needed. Against what have we proclaimed war? What will be left of us when we are done? And by the abyss, what secret truth about Silverfox does Kala possess? Defying her own overwhelming self-disgust, the Wybie forced brutal clarity into her thoughts, listening to all that Silverfox said, to each word, to what lay between each word. She hugged herself beneath the barrage of her daughter's pronouncements. The laying bare of secrets assailed her every instinct, such exposure was fraught with risks. Yet she finally understood something of the position in which Silverfox had found herself. The confessions were a call for help. She needs allies. She knows I am not enough, spirits below, she has been shown that here. More, she knows that these two camps, enemies for so long, need to be bridged. Born in one, she reaches out to the other. All that was Tattersail, and Nighthill cries out to old comrades. Will they answer? She could discern nothing of Whiskey Jack's emotions. His thoughts might well be echoing Kala's position. An abomination. She saw him meet Corlat's eyes and wondered at what passed between them. Think. It is the nature of everyone here to treat every situation tactically, to push away personal feelings, to gauge, to weigh and balance. Silverfox has stepped to the fore, she has claimed a position of power to rival Brood, Anomander Rake and Kala. Does Dujek One Arm now wonder with whom he should be dealing? Does he realize that we were all united because of him, that for 12 years, the clans of Barghast and Revi, the disparate companies from a score or more cities, the Tister Andu, the presence of Rake, Brood and Kala, not to mention the Crimson Guard, all of us. We stood shoulder to shoulder because of the Malazan Empire. Because of the High Fist himself. But we have a new enemy now, and much of its nature remains unknown, and it has engendered a kind of fragility among us. Oh, what an understatement that Dujek One Arm now sees. Silverfox states that we shall have need of the Talan Imis. Only the vicious old emperor could have been comfortable with such creatures as allies, even Kala recoils from what is being forced upon us. The fragile alliance now creaks and totters. Yao, too wise a man, High Fist, to not now possess grave doubts. The one-armed old man was the first to speak after Silverfox's statement, and he addressed the child with slow, carefully measured words. The Talan Imis with whom the Malazan Empire is familiar is the army commanded by Logros. By your words we must assume there are other armies, yet no knowledge of them has ever reached us. Why is that, child? The last gathering, Silverfox replied, was hundreds of thousands of years ago, at which was invoked the ritual of Telen, the binding of the Telen Warren to each and every Imis. The ritual made him immortal, High Fist. The life force of an entire people was bound in the name of a holy war destined to last for millennia. Against the Jaghut, Kala rasped. His narrow, withered face twisted into a sneer behind the already drying blood. Apart from a handful of tyrants, the Jaghut were pacifists. Their only crime was to exist. Silverfox rounded on the warrior. Do not hint at injustices, High King. I possess enough of Nighthill's memories to recall the Imperial Warren, the place you once ruled, Kala, before the Malazans made claim to it. You laid waste an entire realm, you stripped the life from it, left nothing but ash and charred bones. An entire realm. The tall warrior's blood-smeared grin was ghastly. You were there, aren't you? But hiding, I think, twisting the truth into false memories. Hiding, you pathetic, cursed woman. His smile hardened. Then you should know not to test my temper, Bonecaster. Tattersail. Nighthill, dear child. The Wybie saw her daughter pale. Between these two, the feel of a long enmity, why had I not seen that before? There are old memories here, a link between them. Between my daughter and Kala, no, between Kala and one of the souls within her. After a moment, Silverfox returned her attention to Dujek. To answer you, Logros and the clans under his command were entrusted with the task of defending the first throne. The other armies departed to hunt down the last Jaghut strongholds. The Jaghut had raised barriers of ice. Omtosfelik is a warren of ice, High Fist, a place deathly cold and almost lifeless. Jaghut sorceries threatened the world, sea levels dropped, whole species died out, every mountain range was a barrier. Ice flowed in white rivers down from the slopes. Ice formed a league deep in places. As mortals, the Imis were scattered, the unity lost. They could not cross such barriers. There was starvation. The war against the Jaghut had begun long before then, Kala snapped. They sought to defend themselves, and who would not? Silverfox simply shrugged. As Tellan undead, our armies could cross such barriers. The efforts at eradication proved costly. You have heard no whispers of those armies because many have been decimated, whilst others perhaps continue the war in distant, inhospitable places. There was a pained expression on the High Fist's face. The Logros themselves left the Empire and disappeared into the Jagadan for a time, and when they returned they were much diminished. She nodded. Have the Logros answered your call? Frowning, the girl said, I cannot be certain of any of them. They have heard. All will come if they are able, and I sense the nearness of one army, at least I think I do. There is so much you are not telling us, daughter. I can see it in your eyes. You fear your call for help will go unanswered if you reveal too much. Ujek sighed and faced the warlord. Kaladin brooded, shall we resume our discussion of strategy? The soldiers once again leaned over the map table, joined by a softly cackling crone. After a moment, the Wybe collected her daughter's hand and guided her towards the entrance. Kolad joined them as they made their way out. To the Wybe's surprise, Whiskey Jack followed. The cool afternoon breeze was welcome after the close confines of the command tent. Without a word, the small group walked a short distance to a clearing between the Tister Andu and Barghast encampments. Once they halted, the commander fixed his grey eyes on Silverfox. I see much of Tattersail in you, lass. How much of her life, her memories, do you recall? Faces, she answered with a tentative smile. And the feelings attached to them, Commander. You and I were allies for a time. We were, I think, friends. His nod was grave. We were. Do you remember Quick Ben? The rest of my squad. What of Hairlock? Taskren? Do you recall Captain Perrin? Quick Ben, she whispered uncertainly. A mage. 7 cities, a man of secrets, yes, she smiled again, Quick Ben. Hairlock, not a friend, a threat, he caused me pain. He's dead now. I am relieved. Taskren is a name I've heard recently, the scene's favorite high mage, we sparred, he and I, when I was Tattersail, and, indeed, when I was Nighthill. No sense of loyalty, no sense of trust, thoughts of him confuse me. And the captain. Something in the commander's tone brought the Wybe alert. Silverfox glanced away from Whiskey Jack's eyes. I look forward to seeing him again. The commander cleared his throat. He's in pale right now. While it's not my business, lass, you might want to consider the consequences of meeting him, his finding out. His words trailed away in evident discomfort. Spirits below. This Captain Perrin was Tattersail's lover, I should have anticipated something like this. The souls of 2 grown women, Silverfox, daughter. We have met him, mother, she said. When driving the veteran north, do you recall? The soldier who defied our lances. I knew then, I knew him, who he was. She faced the commander again. Perrin knows. Send him word that I am here. Please. Very well, lass. Whiskey Jack raised his head and studied the Barghast encampment. The bridgeburners will be visiting, in any case. The captain now commands them. I am sure that Quick Ben and Mallet will be pleased to make your reacquaintance. You wish them to examine me, you mean, Silverfox said, to help you decide whether I am worthy of your support. Fear not, Commander, the prospect does not concern me, in many ways I remain a mystery to myself, as well, and so I am curious as to what they will discover. Whiskey Jack smiled wryly. You the sorceress's blunt honesty, lass, if not her occasional tact. Corlat spoke. Commander Whiskey Jack, I believe we have things to discuss, you and I. Aye, he said. The Tister Andu turned to the Wybe and Silverfox. We shall take our leave of you too, now. Of course, the old woman replied, struggling to master her emotions. The soldier who defied our lances, oh yes, I recall, child. Old questions, finally answered, and 1,000 more to plague this old woman. Come along, Silverfox, it's time to resume your schooling in the ways of the Reeve. Yes, mother. Whiskey Jack watched the 2 Reeve walk away. She revealed far too much, he said after a moment. The parley was working, drawing the bindings closer, then the child spoke. Yes, Corlat murmured. She is in possession of secret knowledge, the knowledge of the Talar Nimbus. Memories spanning millennia on this world. So much that those people witnessed the fall of the crippled god, the arrival of the Tister Andu, the last fight of the dragons into Starvel Demelane. She fell silent, a veil descending over her eyes. Whiskey Jack studied her, then said, I've never seen a great raven become so obviously flustered. Corlat smiled. Crone believes the secret of her kind's birth is not known to us. It is the shame of their origins, you see, or so they themselves view it. Rake is indifferent to its moral context, as we all are. What is so shameful? The great ravens are unnatural creatures. The bringing down of the alien being who would come to be called the crippled god was a violent event. Parts of him were torn away, falling like balls of fire to shatter entire lands. Pieces of his flesh and bone lay rotting yet clinging to a kind of life in their massive craters. From that flesh the great ravens were born, carrying with them fragments of the crippled god's power. You have seen Crone and her kin, they devour sorcery, it is their true sustenance. To attack a great raven with magic serves only to make the creature stronger, to bolster its immunity. Crone is the firstborn. Rake believes the potential within her is appalling, and so he keeps her and ill close. She paused, then faced him. Commander Whiskey Jack, in Darraghiston we clashed with a mage of yours. Aye. Quick Ben. He'll be here shortly, and I will have his thoughts on all this. The man you mentioned earlier to the child. She nodded. I admit to a certain admiration for the wizard and so look forward to meeting him. The gaze is locked. And I am pleased to have met you as well. Silverfox spoke true words when she said she trusted you. And I believe I do as well. He shifted uncomfortably. There has been scant contact between us that would earn such trust, Corlat. Nonetheless, I will endeavor to earn it. The child has Tattersail within her, a woman who knew you well. Though I never met the sorceress, I find that the woman she was emerging further with each day in Silverfox possessed admirable qualities. Whiskey Jack slowly nodded. She was a friend. How much do you know of the events leading to this rebirth? Not enough, I am afraid, he replied. We learned of Tattersail's death from Perrin, who came upon her remains. She died in the embrace of a Thelamen high mage Belladon, who had travelled out onto the plain with the corpse of his mate Nighthill, presumably intending to bury the woman. Tattersail was already a fugitive, and it's likely Belladon was instructed to retrieve her. It is as Silverfox says, as far as I can tell. Corlat looked away and said nothing for a long time. When she finally did, her question, so simple and logical, left Whiskey Jack with a pounding heart. Commander, we sense Tattersail and Nighthill within the child, and she herself admits to these two, but now I wonder, where then is this Thelamen Belladon? Single quote. He could only draw a deep breath and shake his head. Gods, I don't know. Commentary from Tor.com. Chapter 3. Scene 1. The Wybe, Silverfox's mother, is old and feeling the energy Silverfox, looking about 10 to 11, is drawing from her, aging the Wybe unnaturally, though she believes Silverfox does not know this. Corlat arrives and she and the Wybe discuss how Kala continues to argue against Silverfox, though Corlat says Brood remains steadfast. The Wybe worries that this is only because he needs the Reeve and will end once he allies with the Malazans. Corlat says they hope the Malazans will know more of Silverfox's origin, but the Wybe says though she has the souls of 2 Malazans and the body of a Reeve, she is in truth a Bonecaster soul taken, born in Tellan Warren wove by Nimbus Bonecaster. She wonders why the Talan Imis need a flesh and blood bonecaster. When Corlat points out the Talan marched under the banners of the Malazan Empire, the YB answer they no longer do and wonders why and what hidden motives the Malazans may have. Corlat says Brood is probably aware of such questions and invites the YB to the parley. The YB thinks of how the Malazans and Maranth bombed the Revi land, killed the sacred herds, and yet now they are asked to ally with them, and not even in the name of peace but for yet another war. She looks and sees the Malazans moving their way. Silverfox joins the YB and Corlat and says she is sad because she can sense that the sacred trust between the land and the Revi spirits has been broken and the Revi spirits at naught but untethered vessels of loss and pain. The YB asks if anything can be done and Silverfox says it no longer is necessary. Scene 2. Silverfox tells the YB that while her memories keep her fighting against the Malazans as the enemy, memories should tell her something else and that Corlat can explain. Corlat says the experiences are the same across the breadth of time. Among all who possess memories, whether an individual or a people, life's lessons are ever the same lessons. Silverfox says to think on forgiveness through what's to come, but know that it must not always be freely given. Sometimes forgiveness must be denied. The Malazans join him, Dujek, Whiskey Jack, Artanthos the standard bearer, and Twist the Black Maranth. When the YB asks who the man next to Dujek is, Corlat guesses Whiskey Jack and says he cuts quite a figure. Silverfox says she thinks he'd be a good uncle, she trusts him. Twist, she says, always laughs inside, a laugh of sorrow, while she is and always has been uncertain of Artanthos. Kaladin, Brood and Kala join the parley. The YB thinks that Kala hates Silverfox and seems to know something about her nobody else does, something that makes him fear her. She wonders at his claims to have lived for millennia and destroyed his own empire, and muses he can't be an ascendant as his face and body show the ravages of time, at least a century. He looks with contempt at the Malazans. When Dujek introduces Artanthos, Silverfox thinks he hasn't used that name for some time and also that he isn't as he appears. Dujek asks Brood where the Crimson Guard is and Brood says they are attending to internal matters and will not be involved in the Panion War. Dujek and Brood appear to take an instant liking to each other. Corlat marvels at the ease they put away prior to battle and the YB says pragmatic soldiers are the most frightening. Scene 3. As she passes by some Sister Andy, the YB thinks of their inherent strangeness, a people plagued by indifference. Secret tragedies in the long tortured past. Wounds that would never heal. Even suffering was capable of becoming a way of life. To then extend such an existence from decades into centuries, then into millennia, still brought home a dull shock of horror. She thinks of them as ghosts, always waiting. As she sees Crone, she wonders at the relationship between Brood and Rake and of Crone as the bridge between the two. Silverfox greets Crone and says she had not before realized that your kind were born in the rotting flesh of her and is quickly interrupted by Crone who says it is a secret. Crone tells Silverfox to be careful of what she reveals of herself, that she and the YB will need protection. Inside the parley tent, Whiskey Jack laughs to see the large map table, which had been made by Fiddler and Hedge for a card game using a deck of dragons and then stolen by the Mott irregulars. Silverfox examines the table then asks if Fiddler and Hedge cheated. Whiskey Jack says he doesn't know, but the coins did flow one way only. The way he looks at her shows he senses something familiar about her but doesn't know what it is. Brood says the Panion's forces are preparing to lay siege to Capistan, which is ruled by two warring factions, Prince Jelarkan and the Masked Council, a group of high priests. The prince has hired the Grey Swords from Ellingarth as a mercenary company to help protect the city while the priests have each temple's private company of soldiers. Brood informs them that the peasant army of the Panion, the Tenniscari, is not supplied by the Panion Seer and so they eat the enemy. As Dujek talks strategy, Crone and YB laugh at how much he sounds like Brood. Whiskey Jack says they need to make contact with the prince. Silverfox says he and Dujek have already set up to do so as they plan on liberating Capistan. Brood agrees and says that on the surface, the majority of their forces must be seen marching overland at a pace as a feint to throw off the Seer's plans. The two groups agree that beyond Capistan, they must strike at the heart of the Domine, Coral. Brood says yes, they'll liberate the cities of Seta, Les, and Morik then attack Coral. Whiskey Jack says the armies will march overland, no boats, so as not to make the Panion commander, Kulpath, hurry his forces. He then asks about Rake and Brood says Moonspawn is moving toward the Domine and will disappear so as to be an unpredictable asset. When he says the Andi have formidable sorceries, Silverfox says it won't be enough. Kala interrupts to say Silverfox shouldn't be trusted, that betrayal is her oldest friend. He points out she is killing the YB and should be killed herself. Silverfox is horrified by the revelation. The YB says it is what it is, and that there is an urgency inside Silverfox, a force ancient and undeniable. At which point Kala interrupts again and says, you don't know the half of it, then grabs Silverfox and yells, you're in there, aren't you? Come out, bitch. Brood orders Kala to let her go and says if he touches her again he will beat her. Whiskey Jack says if Kala does it he will rip your heart out. When Kala answers I shake with fear, Whiskey Jack backhands him. Kala starts to draw his sword but Brood grabs him and says he earned it and if Brood needs to he'll use his hammer, burns hammer on Kala. Kala agrees and Brood lets him go. Whiskey Jack asks who Silverfox is. She answers that she is Tattersail and Nighthill and that Tattersail's death happened inside a Telyn Warren, at which point Artanthos flinches. And that a bonecaster from the distant past and an elder god and a mortal helped her be born in the Telyn Warren and in the Revi Plain and she belongs to the Talan Imis. Kala snorts at the name Nighthill as a lack of imagination and wonders if Kayrul even knew. Silverfox goes on to say the Talan Imis are gathering and will be needed against the Panion Seer. They are gathering due to her birth, a summoning every Talan Imis on the world has heard and will try to answer. Scene 4. Whiskey Jack recalls Pale, a plague of suspicions, a maelstrom of desperate schemes. Arcaranes. Belerdin. Nighthill. Tattersail. The list of mages whose deaths could be laid at High Mage Taskren's sandaled feet was written in the blood of Census Paranoia. He's glad Taskren left them but suspects he didn't go far. Whiskey Jack understands that Silverfox knows the outlawing of the Malazans is a sham. Looking at her, he sees Tattersail. He recalls what he had heard of Nighthill, a wielder of high ration, one of the Emperor's chosen, mate to Belerdin, Hard Edge, and he worries about Nighthill's influence within Silverfox. He then remembers that Perrin was Tattersail's love and wonders what this will mean and do to Perrin. He grieves for the YB and thinks despite Kala's advice he will not stand for a child being harmed, though he wonders if she is really a child. He makes eye contact with Corlat and after noting her beauty realizes she's trying to tell him that Silverfox is indeed a child, a blank slate. One that might be influenced by those close to her. Scene 5. Crone is terrified by what has been revealed, that Silverfox controls the Talan Imis, that Kayrul, who knows the Raven's secret, is involved at Silverfox's carelessness in all she reveals. Crone worries Rake might learn that the Ravens were born as maggots from the crippled god's flesh at his fall. She notes they were also at the chaining and have been honorable guardians of the crippled god's magic they can unleash as well. Crone thinks it was lucky for Brood that the Talan Imis alliance with the Malazan Empire ended with the death of the Emperor, but then thinks that Brood also never truly unleashed the Andi. Let loose Anomander Rake has ever shown his own true power. Tenors the power of the land itself. The power to shatter mountains. Crone thinks too that what lies at the heart of the Panion Domine is a mystery but Silverfox knows, and knows the Talan Imis will be needed. She wonders both what that secret is as well as what it is that Calla knows about Silverfox. Scene 6. The Mahbe recognizes that Silverfox is seeking allies, that Tattletale, Nighthill are reaching out to the Malazans. She sees the alliance is fragile and wonders what Dujek will do. Dujek asks why the Malazan Empire knew nothing of other Talan Imis beyond the armies of Logros. Silverfox says the first gathering bound the Imis to each and every one, making him immortal in the cause of war. Calla interrupts to say that the Jaghut were pacifists save a few tyrants. Silverfox counters Calla is hardly the one to talk about injustice and says the Nighthill part of her knows what Calla did, that he laid waste an entire realm. Left nothing but ash and charred bones, and identifies it as the Imperial Warren. Silverfox continues to instruct Dujek by saying Logros and the clans under him were tasked with defending the first throne while the rest went to fight Jaghut, which proved costly, and many armies were decimated. Others, she says, may still be fighting. Dujek says when the Logros left, they went into the Jagadan and came back much diminished. Silverfox says she is unsure if the Logros have answered her call, though she says she senses one army nearby. The YB sees Silverfox is not telling all. Dujek asks Brood if they should continue discussing strategy. As they do so, the YB, Silverfox, Corlat, and Whiskey Jack exit. Whiskey Jack tells Silverfox he sees much of Tattletale in her and she says she recalls faces and feelings. She names some and says her thoughts of Tasgren confuse her, no sense of loyalty, no sense of trust. She says she does recall Paran and has in fact met him already when he had Opon's sword and caught all the lances on it. She tells WJ he knows she's alive and he can send word to Paran. He says they're all coming anyway. Silverfox knows he wants to have Quick Ben and Mallet examine her and says she's curious herself what they will discover. Corlat and Whiskey Jack leave together. Scene 7. Whiskey Jack says Silverfox revealed too much. Corlat agrees and muses on all the Talan Imis have witnessed and remember the fall, the arrival of the Tister Andi, the last flight of the dragons into Starvald Demelaine. When WJ mentions how flustered Crone got, Corlat reveals the great secret and says the Andi all know. In fact, Rake finds the power in Crone, the firstborn, appalling, and so keeps her and her kin close. Corlat says she's looking forward to meeting Quick Ben, whom she recalls from their clash in Darrachiston. She tells him Silverfox trusts him and she does as well. When he recounts for her what he knows of the events of Tattletale's death, Corlat wonders they know she has Nighthill and Tattletale in her, but where is Belodin? Whiskey Jack thinks he has no idea. Amanda's reaction to Chapter 3. 2 things from the extract. Who on earth is Artanthos? Not sure we've yet heard about this chap or chappers. I'm definitely taking more note of those names that crop up as authors of extracts and poems, having encountered many of them through the pages of the books like Gothos and Diker. Second point is on the rather ominous final line. Neither Dujek nor Brood nor anyone else among their legendary company could have anticipated the ensuing clash, not of swords, but of worlds. On my first glance, I thought it said words, and felt it was rather prosaic. Worlds is something altogether greater. Another nice little indication of the sheer time scales we're dealing with. Since memories began, the hills had been sacred to the Revi. Especially ironic considering we're about to enter a meeting with some who existed before memories began. We meet the YB, the mother to the child Silverfox. Her inner monologue is bittersweet. It shows no hatred of Silverfox, Bill, wait for it. Despite the fact that the unique soul is stealing her life force bit by bit, but does rue the lost opportunity of marriage and sees herself as an object to be discarded once its usefulness has run its course. Here is one little hint about Nighthill actually being sister of Cold Knights. The other held back from death through ancient sorceries. We also have a reminder that although Silverfox has been created from the souls of women, goddesses grown, she is but a child. Look at her now, playing the games a child would play. She smiles all unknowing of the price her existence, her growth demands of me. Silverfox looks to become one of the most intriguing characters yet. Is it mere coincidence that she is now present and in existence when the crippled god joins the game? This child belongs to the Talan Imis. She may well be clothed in the flesh of a Revi, and she may well contain the souls of 2 Malazan mages, but she is now a soul taken, and more, a bonecaster. And even these truths but brush the edges of what she will become. How difficult must it be to try and forget the war and pain that has passed between the Malazan, Maranth and the Revi. This is such a terribly fragile and tenuous connection, and the presence of someone like Calla must make it doubly so. This description here feels a little as though it shows some of the complexity of the entire series, the world building, the scale, the life cycles, the different races. Plus, I just like it and wanted to quote it. Here we 3 stand, for all to see, a child of 10 or 11 years, a woman of youthful visage with unhuman eyes, and a bent old woman, and it is, in every detail, an illusion, for what lies within us is reversed. I am the child. The Tister Andi has known thousands of years of life, and the girl hundreds of thousands. Then there is a discussion of memories, experiences, and forgiveness. I must admit that some of this went over my head in terms of depth and philosophical musings, but I sense that all of these will be strong themes through Memories of Ice. The title is indeed a clue. One aspect I think I did understand is that among whichever people, life's lessons are always the same lessons. Isn't it fantastic to see characters we've known for a while from the point of view of new characters? I particularly love the way that the YB and Corlat eye up Whiskey Jack a little bit. Asterisk grins asterisk. If there is Barghast blood in Kaladin Brood, does that mean that he has something to do with the ship Salander? Meeting Calla here properly, and Nighthill in the body of Silverfox, and having seen the long-diminished Carol in Gardens of the Moon and knowing that Draconis was defeated by Anomander, well, we've now seen all the results of those most terrible curses issued in the prologue of Memories of Ice. And I have to say Calla's does seem the most terrible, someone who is desperate for power to never achieve ascendancy, never rise to godhood, but will live to see others reach that goal. Lesser others, in his opinion as well. Yes, for Calla, that is a very proper curse. Ooh, there is that name Artanthos again. And Silverfox says he's not used that name in a long time. Nor is he as he appears. Even more intriguing, Silverfox also calls him a chimera, something to remember, I'm guessing. His first meeting between Brood and Dujek is excellent, 2 skilled veterans who have fought against each other many times finally coming face to face and taking each other's measure. The exchange is quiet, dignified, but with an element of sparring that amuses me. The Tister Andi are just so emo, aren't they? I can't help but picture them forlornly sighing about how life is difficult, and then writing bad poetry. The Tister Andi are definitely the type to have life journal sites that detail the minutiae of living for millennia. Asterisk grins asterisk. A people plagued by indifference and apathy that made even the efforts of civil discourse too much to contemplate. There were secret tragedies in the long tortured past of the Tister Andi. Wounds that would never heal. Ooh, this is one unique factor that I've not seen before in long-lived races, the fact that the Tister Andi do not mourn the dead. Usually with these immortal types, such as elves in other books, they will extensively mourn the passing of any of the souls they've survived with for so long. Mind the Tister Andi seem to have few concerns or cares, internal misery and self-absorption is the order of the day. The Wyber's reflection on Brood and Rake's uneasy alliance makes me think about why they teamed up so long ago. What hold do they have on one another? Why do they fight for the same cause so often? It's awesome to see Crone again. Asterisk grins asterisk and I'm touched by the way she refers to the YB. I do think that Silverfox could perhaps take a little more notice of Crone's long experience with hiding complete truths. That table is too cool. If Fiddler and Hedge used it for the deck of dragons, might that have imbued it with latent energies? Given Fiddler's sensitivity. This is also the second mention of the Mott irregulars, thieves and scoundrels by the sound of it. I'm keen to see them center stage. We have a quick crash course in the situation that Dujek and Brood are facing concerning the Panion taking over various cities and the political situations they're in. I'm sure all will become clearer. This feels as close to an info dump as Erickson ever gets. Once again, a nice little comment on the burgeoning respect and relationship between Brooke and Dujek and the poetry in their mutual war. If I was having a rather cagey discussion with new allies, I don't think I'd want Silverfox there with the amount of information she spills. The child just can't keep secrets. Kala isn't exactly endearing himself to readers here, is he? Threatening Silverfox, revealing the fact that child is destroying mother, trying to call out the goddess whom he cursed into this position. Not a nice guy at all. Silverfox really does tell too much, revealing that she exists to command them. What would people do to gain power over the entire Talan Imis race? More than Silverfox can bear while she's still childlike and not grown into her full powers, I'm sure. I think Erickson is also presenting an observation on the nature of motherhood. We've seen the Jaghut mother sacrificing her children, and here we can see the sacrifice of the YB to bring Silverfox to life. Is Erickson suggesting that motherhood always involves some sort of sacrifice? Interesting. Brood's power as an ascendant is that of Tenors, the power of the land itself. The power of Burn, who is fading and dying under the ravages of the crippled god. That is going to have repercussions, none. Whiskey Jack shows tact that I had forgotten he possessed in talking to Silverfox of Parent and hinting at the previous relationship. Imagine having to broach that sort of issue with someone who looks, at best, 11 years old, but having to do so in order that his captain does not suffer extreme pain if coming upon her all unawares. I love Whiskey Jack. I have to confess to grinning widely when seeing that Crone's great secret that she panics her about is already known to Rake, and is a reason he keeps her so close. Okay, it seems to me that all the recapping is done, and it is time to enter the real meat of the tale. See you next week. Bill's reaction to Chapter 3. The tragedy of the YB will run through much of this book, a young Reeve maiden turned unnaturally into a bent old woman and continuing to age at a greatly accelerated rate. Which in turn breeds an unnatural mother-daughter relationship, the daughter feeding off the mother's life and in so doing killing her and the mother resenting, hating the child for doing so. However, I do think Amanda you're right that Erickson is pointing out that motherhood, and I'd broaden that to parenthood, always involves sacrifice. Does it not? Here the sacrifice is made literal. And does a child's growth not every day remind us of how old we are getting, how much closer to death, as we watch them grow? It all goes so fast is a common parental complaint, after all. We're also introduced quickly to the inherent mistrust between these allies early in the alliance, the questioning of motives. This will rear up later as well, so it's good we're set up for that, no matter the seeming good-natured acceptance we see in this meeting. The Wyver's question, why do the Immers need a flesh and blood bonecaster, is a good one, and will indeed be answered. We can see in the Wyver's thoughts on working with the enemy how smart a move it was, this deception with regard to Dujek and the Empress. Think not of mistrust, think not of the horrors visited upon us. Dujek One Arm and his host have been outlawed by the hated Empress. We've got some hints to Silverfox's long-range plans, at least one of her plans with regard to the Reeve spirits that are untethered. She will answer them and be a bridge between ancient memories and recent memories. And in her words on memories, we have again that theme of tolerance, of empathy, across the breadth of time, among all who possess memories, no matter the people, the tribe, the species, whether they have stars on their bellies or not, life's lessons are ever the same. It's a harsh turn from that to sometimes forgiveness must be denied, begging the question of course as to what is Silverfox planning to not forgive? And whom? Warning, I'm going to be talking about hints regarding Artantho's identity. Though I won't be naming him myself, the hints, all of which we have been given, may lead you to who it is. Some you know who you may wish to skip this paragraph. Closing square bracket. Okay, we're told outright that Arthanthos is not who he appears to be, that Silverfox knew him, that she was never sure of him, and that he's used that name before but not for some time. Since he's with the Malazans, it's probably a good bet that it's the Malazan aspect of her that knew him, Tattersail. Thus we can guess it is someone Tattersail never fully trusted. At this point, I'll simply say we've seen him before in his true self, and that we've seen his name or a variant of it as well. Amanda's interjection, asterisk lightbulb moment, asterisk I know who it is. Closing square bracket. Back to our scheduled commentary. By the way, we'll see a bit of what is going on with the internal matters of the Crimson Guard and why they aren't here in Esselmont's return of the Crimson Guard. That tragic history of the Andy will slowly get revealed in bits and pieces, and no, not completely, and will as one may imagine play a role in events. After all, Erickson is a firm believer in this series in Faulkner's timeless words, the past is never dead. It's not even past. And we've seen this idea of the long-lived Andy, the despair such long life could possibly entail before. As well as the question of why they fight for causes not their own. Is it ennui? To stave off despair? Is it a belief in freedom, however the Andy may define it? Is it desire to feel like that integral player in world events? I also enjoy Crone's secret being not so much a secret. Love the table. And we haven't seen the last of it by a long shot. And is anybody shocked that Fiddler and Hedge rigged the games? There's the mercenary company I mentioned earlier, the Grey Swords from Ellingarth. Cannibalism. Yum. Consumption made literal. Back to how this alliance, while coming nicely together, isn't exactly 100% transparent. We've got Dujek and WJ already planning how to contact the Grey Swords and Brood's side already positioning Moon's spawn. It's a little line, Silverfox is not enough when Brood references the formidable sorceries of the Tister Andy, which of course means one has to ask what does she know of the Panion Seer and what could its power be that even Moon's spawn break. And the Andy will not suffice and that makes her so sure the Talanimus, thousands of them, will be needed. What a horribly wrenching scene, Silverfox's learning of what she is doing to her mother. By the way, stop for a moment and just visualize that scene, Kala, worn by life, mailed, grabbing a little girl and pulling her face to his and calling her bitch. Yes, hard to like Kala much in this book. As Whiskey Jack clearly does not. File that little confrontation away for later. Note Whiskey Jack's suspicion that Texgren is closer than is meant to be thought. Whiskey Jack and Corlat. It's not all death and war. Let's see where this goes. File cabinet, Crone telling us the Ravens have been honorable guardians of the crippled god's magic. Then later Corlat telling WJ the Ravens carry with them fragments of the CG's power. Interesting complexity that as much as one can't stand Kala in this book so far, his is the voice that defends the Jaghut against genocide. So yes, now suddenly we're nodding our head in agreement with someone who just tried to beat up a 10-year-old girl and called her bitch. Wait, how did that happen? What's going on with those missing Talanimus? Yes, a bit awkward the whole parent, Tattersail, 10-year-old girl, lovers thing, eh? Wait, the last flight of the dragons into Starvel Demelane. Where did that come from? And do we get to see it? What made it the last flight? What a tease. Speaking of a tease line. Where then is this Thelamen Bellerden? Q organ music da da da.